The rain was falling so hard that night it felt as if the heavens themselves had decided to weep with me. I remember standing on the cracked pavement outside my own home, the only home I had worked my whole life to build, and watching through fogged-up windows as my children, the very ones I had sacrificed everything for, turned their backs on me. Their silhouettes moved inside with a coldness I could never have imagined possible. My son closed the door, my daughter drew the curtains, and I was left in the storm, clutching only a thin jacket and the aching weight of betrayal in my chest. They had inherited $64 million from an uncle I barely knew, and in the space of days, decades of love, sleepless nights, and sacrifice seemed to count for nothing. I was no longer a father in their eyes, just an inconvenient reminder of the humble, struggling life they now wanted to forget. That night, drenched and shaking, I asked myself the question no parent ever wants to whisper: how could my own flesh and blood abandon me like this? Before we go deeper into this story, let me pause for just a moment. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, then please take a second to like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to our channel, Kindness Corner. Together, we can spread stories that remind people that no matter how cruel the world may feel, love and compassion can still change lives. In the weeks after that storm, I wandered aimlessly through life with nothing but silence for company. The house, once echoing with laughter and arguments and even the comforting creaks of late-night footsteps, now belonged to strangers. My children had moved in, redecorated, and locked me out with the kind of precision you would expect from business partners, not family. I rented a small, damp room in the back of a failing motel. The walls smelled of mildew, the mattress sagged beneath my tired body, and the single light bulb flickered as if mocking the fragility of my situation. I worked odd jobs to keep myself fed, sweeping parking lots, fixing gutters, even scrubbing floors that no one cared about. Every coin I earned felt heavier than gold, not because of its worth, but because of the bitter truth it carried. I had once been enough for my children, and now I wasn't even worth a phone call. There were nights when hunger gnawed at me like an old enemy. I would skip meals to save money, surviving on bread and stale coffee. The raincoat I wore was full of holes, yet I clung to it because it had once belonged to their mother, my late wife, who had passed years earlier, leaving me to raise the kids on my own. I often thought, if she were here, would they have turned out this way? Would she have allowed their hearts to harden so completely? Sometimes I prayed she couldn't see me from wherever she rested, because if she did, she would see a man who had lost not only his children but also his dignity. The cruelty of it all was not just in their abandonment, but in the way they flaunted their new lives. Social media posts showed them on yachts, dressed in designer clothes, laughing with friends who only saw them as dollar signs. I watched those images from the cracked screen of an old phone, my heart breaking a little more with each swipe. They hadn't just left me behind, they wanted the world to know I didn't exist. They had wealth now, and in their eyes, wealth made blood ties irrelevant. But life has a strange way of balancing the scales. It doesn't always happen quickly, but when it does, it arrives like a storm of truth that no one can outrun. Months passed, and while my children lived in luxury, their lives began to unravel in ways they could never have anticipated. The same friends who clinked glasses with them on yachts soon grew hungry for more, pushing them into reckless decisions. Investments were made without thought. Parties stretched into weeks of excess. Lawsuits crept in from business partners who felt cheated. And slowly, their empire of millions began to crumble. Meanwhile, I kept living quietly, surviving on humility and the little I could earn with my hands. Though I was poor, I still carried the richness of lessons learned through hardship. Every morning, as I fixed fences for a kind old farmer who paid me in both cash and food, I reminded myself that wealth doesn't always live in bank accounts. Sometimes, it hides in resilience, in kindness, in the ability to wake up after another broken night and keep going. I had been abandoned, yes, but I was not defeated. The rain no longer felt like tears. It felt like cleansing. Then came the day they returned. It was early evening, the sky painted with the bruised colors of a fading sunset. I was sitting outside the motel with a chipped mug of tea when a black car pulled up. The doors opened, and out stepped the very children who had once cast me aside. But they were not the same. Their expensive clothes looked worn, their faces carried shadows of sleepless nights, and the arrogance that once coated their words had been stripped away. They stood before me, trembling, not with cold but with shame. And for a moment, we said nothing. The silence between us was heavier than the rain that had fallen months earlier. When they finally spoke, their voices cracked with desperation. The millions were gone. The friends had vanished. The houses, the cars, the glittering life they had chosen over family, all of it had slipped away like sand through clenched fists. They told me they were sorry, that they had been blinded by greed, that they had forgotten the love of the man who had raised them when no one else would. They begged for forgiveness, for a chance to come home, for a father's embrace that money could never replace. And as they wept before me, I felt a storm rising within my chest, not of anger, but of aching love. For though they had abandoned me, though they had left me to shiver in the rain, they were still my children. And a parent's heart, no matter how broken, still beats with forgiveness. I did not welcome them back with riches or grand gestures. Instead, I offered them something money could never buy, a second chance. We returned to a simpler life, not in mansions or hotels but in that old home they had once locked me out of. The walls were bare, the furniture was worn, but it became a place of healing. We cooked meals together, shared laughter over cracked plates, and slowly rebuilt not just a family but the trust that had been shattered. They learned the value of humility, of hard work, of living not for appearances but for love. And in those months of rebuilding, I realized something powerful. Sometimes it takes losing everything to understand what truly matters. If this story has touched your heart, if it has reminded you of the power of love, forgiveness, and second chances, please don't leave without liking this video, subscribing to Kindness Corner, and sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. Your engagement helps us bring more stories of hope and humanity to people around the world. And before we end, I want to make a special request. Tell me in the comments, do you believe every betrayal deserves forgiveness, or are some wounds too deep to heal? I want to hear your thoughts, because your voice matters here.